Congratulations should be in order for Ren Wyld, formerly known as Karen Wyld, the published Indigenous author who was on their way to Brisbane to attend the 2025 Black and Write Fellowship announcement. Receiving this fellowship is nothing to be sneezed at for a working class writer. It's $15,000 to continue creative work. That's life-changing for people who, again, are working class writers. But in Brisbane, on the morning of the day of the event, Ren was called into a meeting with the State Library of Queensland, specifically with the CEO thereof, Vicky McDonald, and they were told that they would not be receiving the fellowship and obviously the money associated with it, despite having already signed a contract. It quickly occurred to Ren that before they had been notified, before anyone had been notified, they'd received an email from Mackenzie Scott, a journalist at The Australian, asking them some questions about some tweets of theirs and their eligibility for the fellowship. Questions weren't loaded at all, no way. Question 1, do you think you are a worthy recipient of the fellowship? Question 2, do you think it is appropriate that the Queensland Arts Minister has written to the State Library asking organisers to reconsider your appropriateness for the award? Before we even begin to consider what material it is that apparently constitutes grounds for reconsidering Ren's appropriateness for the award, let's state the obvious. This conversation, up until 10:20am when Ren received the email, had only 3 parties in it. Mackenzie from The Australian, the Queensland Arts Minister, John Paul Langbrook, yes, that's Kate's brother if you're into genealogy, and the leadership at the State Library of Queensland who issue the Black and Write Fellowships. Ren Wyld having the temerity to receive money in order to do their job as a working class writer has been the subject of media attention since late last year. This article here started life in the Daily Telegraph. Extremely troubling. Taxpayer dollars bankrolling artists who praise Hamas. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar had just been murdered by the IDF. Wyld said on X that Sinwar was a brave warrior to the end, resistance fighter, leader with vision, sovereign Indigenous man. There is a diversity of perspectives among the left and among people who are pro-Palestinian as to what it is that Hamas and Yahya Sinwar meant to the Palestinian people. And I have no doubt that just as I was, Wyld was exposed to a lot of that diversity of discussion and was sharing some of it and participating in it. At the same time, we have to acknowledge the natural difficulties that come with discussing anyone related to an organisation that's a prescribed terrorist organisation in this country, particularly when we all know that we have a voracious political opposition who are hungrily searching for screen grabs like this in order to take them to the media. We know this for a fact. To that end, Wyld actually deleted that tweet not long after. And if you seek out what Wyld has recently said in the wake of all this, Wyld said, "I do not and never have supported terrorism or terrorists. Stop clutching pearls and be serious, please. Palestinian people are being murdered, tortured and starved by the state of Israel. Focus on the discussions that really matter." But when we look at the people who supply this kind of information to the media, we know that we aren't looking at well-intentioned people or people who are willing to consider authors like Ren Wyld as well-intentioned. So I can't know who it is that collated those tweets and that data and submitted it to the Daily Telegraph late last year, but there is a quote in there by Executive Council of Australian Jury co-chair Alex Rivchin in that article, and this really falls in line with the kind of work that he's been doing all along. He's long extolled the virtues and the importance of advocating to get everyone sacked for making statements in league with Palestine, against Israel, against Israel's genocide in any way, shape or form, culminating in his list of demands prior to the election in which he demanded mass deportations for anyone seen to be expressing anti-Zionist sentiment, the abolition of academic freedoms, the abolition of basic protesting rights, student freedoms. He wants to enshrine the inability of artists like Wyld to ever be able to obtain grants again, to make his work easier. A whole host of frankly fascist demands, really emblematic of the kind of work he's been doing all along. Alex Alex Rivchin and lobbyists like him want to make it too terrifying for working class people to express the outrage that they feel about the Gaza genocide. To that end, they work with the people in power that they know and have on call, plus stenographer, activist journalists, we'll get to that in a moment, create moments in which people get fired or their grants get rescinded. Stories are made on that. The pressure against arts institutions to cave the next time one of these stories looms becomes greater and greater every time. It snowballs. Chip LeGrand is an activist journalist. I know he'd probably thumb his nose at the term, look down on it. Seems to apply to social media attention seekers like me, and not prestige media figures such as himself. However, the truth is that he creates these moments before they're public, hand in hand with figures in position of power. It doesn't always work out, fortunately, such as last year's Melbourne Writers' Festival, where he attempted to pressure people over this, a sentence. A very artful sentence, if you ask me. Aboriginal and Palestinian solidarity has a long history, a relationship that's more vital than ever in the movement to resist colonialism and speak out against atrocities. The hyper-partisan, ultra-Zionist perspective of Chip LeGrand, and whoever it was that fed him the story, is that you're not allowed to say that. Because if you say that, you're denying Israel's right to exist. When the pressure to get the sentence changed or the event cancelled or whatever the fuck they wanted didn't work out, the deputy chair of the festival ended up resigning. So they had pressure to change that diplomatic sentence from within the festival, one of its highest ranks of, I suppose, power and influence, and pressure from stenographers like Chip LeGrand. So you see why I say it's activist journalism. I mean, they're creating the news in order to create more news like it. That must have been really intimidating, and it's admirable to see that they didn't fold. But many bodies, many arts institutions, it seems, do fold. Australian-born Maori artist Anne-Marie Tafeo was invited by Writing New South Wales to curate an arts festival this year called Boundless Festival. But they did have boundaries, as it turned out. Their boundary was making reference to Palestine in any way, shape or form. Apparently, calling a poetry session from the page to the sea was a bridge too far. All the ultra-Zionist media and politics types and their attendant lapdogs in liberal arts institutions, I suppose, have all kind of collectively agreed that you're not allowed to say river to the sea in any way, shape or form. They feel that they've reached a consensus that that's a bad terrorist thing to say. Many of us have not reached that consensus with them. To many of us, it is an obvious reference to the earned and the rightful freedom, complete, total, geographical and sovereignty-based freedom of the Palestinian people. Freedom to not be political prisoners as they are. Freedom to not live in a fucking open-air concentration camp like Gaza is. The type of meddling shit is starting to backfire on these bastards, and I'm so overjoyed to see it. Anne-Marie and everyone else associated with the festival all unanimously pulled out. It's incredible. They weren't left with any festival at all. Even though, the impact to these working class writers and artists is devastating, They're living from grant to grant a lot of the time and from appointment to appointment. So to have this snatched away from them because the people responsible for these liberal arts institutions are fucking cowards, it's horrendous. Now, Ren Wyld did the right thing. They said the right thing given, their position, given that it's all set against the backdrop of mounting genocidal campaign and starvation for the people in Gaza. They said, they're not the story, that the Australian government's complicity in the genocide of Palestinian people is the main story. And that is absolutely true. We need to remember that these campaigns happen against people like Ren Wyld in order to facilitate silencing of all of us. We're all meant to be as a result of seeing things like this happen to fellow working class people like Ren. We're all meant to see it and go, oh shit, I'd better shut up because it might happen to me too. What I'm seeing, the death and destruction and starvation and genocide that I'm seeing on my phone, I might speak less than impeccably about it. I might say something that might not pass muster with our liberal arts overlords or my employer or the lobbyist who's been watching my social media to screen grab what I'm saying. I might lose my employment. I might lose my money. We need to look at that and say, no, that's not the fucking story, and that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to be louder than ever. The Guardian wrote about this process, spoke to Ren and spoke to all the other parties involved, and there's some pretty horrendous buck passing going on in this article. Have a look at this. A spokesperson for the management at State Library of Queensland basically passed the buck to John Paul Langbrook. That wouldn't surprise me. Here's him, Israeling it up at some point. He's basically passed the buck back to the State Library. He just said, all I said was that the award shouldn't be presented at the library. Federal Arts Minister Tony Burke said, no, this is a Creative Australia thing. You'll have to speak to them. And then Creative Australia have come in and gone, no, nothing to do with us. You'll have to speak to the State Library of Queensland. This kind of bullshit and cowardice really reminds me of the State Library of Victoria back when they cancelled an event featuring Omar Saker because of his solidarity with Gaza. They were just weasels about it at the time. They did everything they could to try and avoid accountability before their own staff as well as before the public. And what they ended up creating was a near mutiny from their internal side. Staff were just so pissed off. So look, if they're too cowardly to actually admit who's responsible for this, and if you were hoping for a bit of homework after this video and you're wondering what to do, why don't you contact all of them? That is, the management at the State Library of Queensland, the State Arts Minister in Queensland, the Federal Arts Minister, and Creative Australia. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to be able to respond to these silencing campaigns with outrage of our own to let people in these fucking liberal arts institutions and their Zionist politician and lobbyist overbears know that we will not roll over when we are told to.